right here. But I have
Okay, it's 3 o'clock on February 12th, and we are going to begin this month's MTRAC meeting. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business on the agenda is that we are required by ordinance to do a reorganization. I've been on the committee for 3.5 years now, and we've never done one before. So we will go according to Hoyle or Robert's rules or whichever one we need to do. I'd like to request nominations for chairperson.
I'll nominate Martin.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then we'll move right into the City Council liaison update.
Good afternoon. So I don't have much to report. We are in the middle of budget season. The manager will do the, sort of his manager's presentation on the budget at the upcoming meeting on Tuesday. Then the introduction of the budget for the public is scheduled tentatively for March 17th. And then adoption of the budget would be April 21st. So that is sort of how things are lining up right now. There will be a presentation included in Tuesday's packet for capital for the budget this year. And I don't have any other updates, Martin, and I don't know if anyone has any questions for me.
Did you receive a response from Aaron on the mercantile license?
Yes, I'm sorry, I did. Okay, so I asked Aaron at Martin's request to sort of understand what happens if someone applies for a 2026 mercantile license and that we validated that they did not apply in 2025 but rented their property. And she said that they would be required to pay for the 2025 mercantile license along with any compounded fees associated with that, and that would be the process.
That's great news.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
I had asked because we talked the last meeting about the fact that several renters got caught in the net, right? But those were only the Verbo and the transient rental properties. So some of those individuals stepped forward and said, okay, let me go get my 2025 license retroactively. Others, it was either return to sender, no response. And so therefore, if you just Buffalo the city, you shouldn't be able to not have to pay your 2025 fee. So it sounds like we're aligned on that. Yeah. I also did take the opportunity to go back and look at Sarah's awesome work from last year on the issue, where she had found that there were 180 non-compliant rental properties. Only 26 of those were transient properties that we actually did use the software to comb, okay? So we caught 14% in the net, but 86% escaped. And this year we do hope that, that the rental properties will be able to be added. That was what Maureen had reported the last time. And I think that it continues to be MTRAC's responsibility to keep on top of that progress and know where the city is headed.
Is there a penalty assessed against? I mean, I hope it's not just I get away with it until somebody catches me and then I just pay it. Is there a significant penalty or not really?
Not
Well, there's a delinquency fee, an interest
Yeah,
charge.
right, and but it's not as if it's, thousands of dollars run, to be
There
honest.
were-
And there's nothing on there's nothing on the books that permits or,
For a very
Right.
short time, the fee for being late was 10% a month. And
Wow.
the city, the people that were subject to it revolted. And it was.
Mind you, that's
repealed.
$13 or $15. I mean, it's not
10% a month? No.
$15 a month? Isn't it $150? I forget how
No,
much.
it's between
For a merc
$100 and
license?
$500
Mm-hmm.
is the license fee, based upon on size. Yeah, it's about 175 on average.
Okay, so
Okay,
17.
but 17 per month.
Yes.
If you're 10 months late, you're now paying
I
100%.
understand. Okay.
No, it's a shame that what we don't do is advertise that if you don't pay, when we do catch you, you are paying retroactively from the date that we established this rule. So that can give people the incentive to, I don't feel like if they catch me paid the lump, I would rather just start paying it now.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
what I was
not,
hoping
that's
to
not an
motivate.
erroneous, I mean, that's not,
So the city did announce publicly in the beginning of the season that if you didn't get your license, you would be fined.
Okay.
We just didn't follow through on that this year. I hope in '26 we do.
Certainly, code enforcement did have conversations and sent out letters, so there was activity, just probably not as punitive as,
Sure.
we're discussing here.
Do we know what percentage we don't have ownership for, or like an actual human contact for, those return to senders?
Job, I want to say that I think it was only a couple. I
Out of
want
the
to say,
26, though.
yeah, it was only maybe two that they got the address.
But out of the
returned.
26 that were the transient.
Yeah, right,
Okay,
right.
so the 154 that are available through realtors, I have to assume that the realtor has a contact for them.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on that topic? Anything else you wanted to add to the update?
No.
Okay.
I'm good, thank you.
Next topic, under old business, the bidding process for the beach concession fees was successfully concluded. There were no competitive bids. Each property was bid on by the current leaseholder. And the amount that is being realized was exactly the amounts that were presented in what I sent you to react to back in the beginning of December. So it was a 5% increase over 2026, and then every property levels out from there to be the same by 2030 per linear foot. The way that breaks down is a 5% increase this year, 5.43% in '27, 5.77% in 2028, 6% in 2029, and 6.4% in 2030.
So I clearly messed up on this, but did anyone bid for the spot that they didn't? And is it too late to bid for something that has not been bid on?
I would have to follow up with Paul and Chris Gillen-Schwartz, because the bidding process was open and closed, and there is sort of a regulatory requirement around that, Ron, so I can't say.
It may have to be renoticed, for example.
Which, yeah, so that may very well, which means posting in the Herald and all, a bunch of other stuff.
I'm
So,
wondering where your bid was.
We had a number of issues going
Sure, no, I
on.
understand,
I missed
yeah.
that, so.
and also, I don't know the timing also, because I think Paul has to notify from a CAFR standpoint, so I don't know how that plays into it, if that still was a condition of it. So I can certainly ask him just to reach out to you if there's any opportunity.
All right. I tried to get a number of people to do it, and then I obviously was unsuccessful if no one did it, and so I was just said, I'll do it myself, but I didn't.
I'll ask him.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We can talk about this some more under 2026 topics, but Mike, I think you and I had thought about going to see Steve Stager to ask about whether there is the opportunity to add boxes to alleviate traffic.
Right.
So I'll be in touch with you on that, and you and I
yeah.
can meet with him.
that'd be
I
great.
do want to just note for the record is that some of the other conditions included in the contract are about setup and timing and what is allowed. So those they are clearly delineated. There will be markings on the beach as to what the parcel allows for, the location of the parameters, et cetera. So, and there will be a meeting by the operations coordinator for the city with each of the beach concessions at the start of the season to make sure that they're clear. It's in the contract, but just to make sure that from an operational standpoint, they understand what they're required to adhere to. So just wanted to make sure that we added that in too.
I would call this a major step forward for the city in terms of the way that this is being administered, the fact that there is now that logic flow that can be applied, will be applied in perpetuity. And I'm proud of the role that MTRAC played in helping to drive that process. So thank you all for your input and suggestions. Second item under old business, you'll recall that we had made a recommendation on resident parking permits, which were partially accepted. We had suggested it stay at 500 because of the increase from the seasonals from 350 to 5. We had also suggested that the amount be the same in the metered zones because the homeowner has no control over whether their zone is metered or not. The city chose to go with a 750 number for that. Following that, at our last meeting, we had some discussion about the fact that there was a proposal to only allow full-time residents to receive the permits, where the original idea was no short-term rentals. Now it was even part-time homeowners or would not be able to have their permits. It was brought before council. There were significant questions that were asked on both sides, which I thought was a very healthy and transparent process. The original way that city council went about that was to pass the resolution including the restriction. But then Mayor Mullock encouraged additional dialogue, which did occur. And by the time it was on the agenda the next time, it had already been determined that the resolution that had been passed was being tabled. And it will go no further, so it's tabled forever. If you are tabled forever, yes. That's how you apparently, once a resolution is passed, you can't then, that's the way, yeah, that's the way that works. I think that the primary reason, and Maureen, you can certainly underscore this, there weren't very many, as Maureen had presented to us at the last meeting. I think it was 40, and 15 of those were short-term rentals. So we're not talking about a lot of spaces. There was dialogue about, at one of the earlier meetings, about how there's just space after space after space that's vacant, and we're wasting one of our precious resources. The gentleman had actually referred to Windsor Street and Congress Street, which is where I live, so I had some interest in that, and I actually did a bit of a detailed walk, and I found that there were a total of 6 out of maybe 25, so almost 25% were on Windsor Street of the entire city. So
Six of
the 25
of the 25 that were
residents.
Okay.
Yep. So since we're all affected by what we experience, and it's a one-way street, if you're driving by these empty spots every single day, you think that this is a citywide problem, and it wasn't. It was a local neighborhood problem because many of these houses on Windsor were built without driveways. I also found and brought to the city that, in my opinion, there were 10 spots on Windsor and Congress that could be reclaimed by restriping. So there was a yellow curb in places where it was not blocking a site triangle, it was not blocking a driveway, but for whatever reason, the line had been drawn that you couldn't park there. So the city manager did agree that he would follow up on that. There were 3, for example, by the entrance, by the Sandpiper. So it's south of South Lafayette. So it's not in the site triangle. Right. Okay. There were 3 spots along the curb that absolutely could have parking and wouldn't interfere with anything.
And they were just drop off and pick up or
No.
spots or what?
No.
Sometimes over the years, things have changed. And, I know in one particular instance on Hughes, where if you looked at it from the street, it would appear to be no issue, and you would make a recommendation such as that. It's the problem with the person trying to pull out. Because it's a one-way street, they can't make the turn because there's a tree there. So there's a tree in front of their property that can't be moved. The only way they can get out, if someone parks there, which looks like a good parking spot, is if there was car was there, they could never get out of their driveway. So there are sometimes those kind of scenarios that, to the apparent eye, I'm not saying the examples that Martin said, but, when you're looking at it, so it's good that Paul's taking a look at it. The other thing I just wanted to reinforce about how this, the other component to the permit parking is that short-term rentals, transient rentals will not be allowed to apply and receive as long as they have a mercantile license. a permit parking. So there were some impacted, but what was reinforced by the city solicitor during these discussions is that that was always the intention of the ordinance that was on the books. Somehow it fell through the cracks, and now it will be confirmed and checked. So,
Does that include, I know of rentals that have like Bank Street parking as a parking spot. Is that?
no, this is permit parking in front of their house.
So they have a permit for that.
Right, they go to Bank Street, yes, separately,
Same thing
yes.
with Jackson Street lot.
Yeah.
You can rent a space in Jackson Street lot.
Right, yeah. So, anyway,
And that doesn't flood.
just wanted to create that, make sure that everyone understood that distinction
Yep.
on what was changed or not changed.
So we got to the right place, in my opinion. I didn't really know how we were going to determine what a full-time resident is. Bob
So you're
Elwell,
saying
who's,
just that part of it was tabled, but they're still increasing the dollar?
there's, everything else had already been passed. This was an addendum to the recently passed resolution to restrict it to if you have a Cape May driver's license. And I can tell you that I very judiciously have to monitor how much time I spend in each state for tax purposes, but I could have a New Jersey driver's license tomorrow without increasing how much time I'm here, okay, or a Cape May driver's license. I also already have a vehicle registered in New Jersey, and I do have a driver's license number in New Jersey. Incredibly, it's the same number I had when I first got my license when I was 17. They keep it for you forever. Yep, yep. So. Exactly. And the other part is I actually have it memorized because you used to have to write it on your checks. Oh, you don't know this, yeah. You used to have to write it on the back of your checks because no ATMs.
That's true.
Any other comments or questions on the resident parking fees? I know that Russ will be pleased because he had several members of cottagers that were concerned about where they were going to park.
Martin, just one question. So this change, or Maureen, this change is going to happen. What are we going to be looking for in a year other than revenue? Are you looking for different outcomes on the street, different, more availability, less availability?
I would say that was such a small group. I mean, in total, I think we were looking only at about 65 parking spots in total. This just sort of reinforced an existing ordinance that it's not available for what is considered a commercial property. So it sort of provided the ability for us to clean that up a little bit, and for the clerk's office to be monitoring when they're getting a mercantile license to double check against any permit parking applications they may have. So really, it affected a very small group of people, but just sort of reinforced. Yeah, a good policy to make, from an enforcement standpoint, making sure we're being fair to, everyone equally, so.
There will be a small increase in revenue because we eliminated the seasonals. So anybody that had a season, and it wasn't very many, went from 350 to 500, and then the metered spots went from 5 to 750. As we were in the throes of this, I started to realize that this issue is now getting so much publicity that there actually may be more applications for resident parking permits as a result of the work that was done. People may not have realized they could even get one. And so we'll have to wait and see whether that happens or not.
Well, and then I get that we can see when that happens, but there'll be a question of how many permit applications are there for how many cars versus total spots. I don't know if that's something that we measure.
You're only allowed one spot.
I mean, how many available spots are on the
Oh,
street
okay.
compared to the application numbers?
Yeah, we'll talk about parking in a moment, in a couple of moments. But there was some activity at the planning board this past meeting, not yesterday's meeting or 2 days ago, the previous one. If you didn't see that, I think you might want to tune into that one because I know you have a particular interest there. Okay, on to new business, unless anybody else had any other old business. So Sarah, after our last meeting, circulated an email that highlighted the fact that there is pending resolution at the state level that would require municipalities to allow accessory dwelling units, ADUs, okay? And I found it extremely informative, but at the same time perplexing. Because I have no life, actually I have a very long drive, I listen to every planning board meeting and every zoning board meeting, and at planning board meetings, they talk about accessory units, and incentives for accessory units. And at zoning board meetings, they talk about you can't have an accessory unit. So I was pretty puzzled and dug into a little bit. I'm certainly not expert at it yet. I did have a very brief conversation with Craig Hurlis, the city engineer, on the topic, and he did confirm, yes, there is an ordinance that provides incentives for accessory apartments. So I built upon what was contained in Sarah's email, where an ADU is a garage conversion, backyard cottage, a mother-in-law's suite, or an above-garage apartment. Okay? And that's not what the city allows. The city allows accessory apartments. Okay? And the way that works is that it's very restrictive. There's, in what you're reading, there's a minimum size that the apartment has to be. It must be front-facing to the street. It can only have one entrance. So, for example, converting a garage where you would have a garage door and a side door, you'd have to close one of them off, and it would have to be front-facing.
You can only have one entrance to the apartment? Doesn't that violate fire? That's like the code?
Probably not for a single story, or, you know,
I guess because of windows, you're saying, is it?
once you hit above 3 stories, you probably hit some limitations there.
You have to meet the parking standard, the RSIS parking standard, okay? And the work that we're doing on Washington Mall or in the commercial zone, the incentive that's being provided is not having to provide a parking space.
But that's specific to
Yep. You have to comply with all of the New Jersey affordable housing regulations. You have to deed restrict it. It can only be used to meet affordable housing, okay? And what that means is that you can't use it as the owner. You can only make it available to be used under the affordable housing laws. And I think the Lafayette Street units are still not full.
Yeah, they are.
Are they finally?
We finally got the second tenant.
So what that means is, if you aren't aware, these units would have to go to a lottery. And anybody that meets the income standards would be eligible to apply, even if they had absolutely no connection to Cape May.
But I will tell you that the criteria, the application, the verification, the documentation is, very detailed.
Yep.
So there's, having been following up routinely and regularly with the firm that we use to do the placement for the 2 units on Lafayette, I've been in touch with them probably at least once or twice a month for the last 12 months. So this is no easy process. We had over 800 applications, over 800 for those 2.
For 2 places?
Yes, but the majority of them, Ron, did not meet the criteria from the income. Even when they met the income, they did not be able to provide documentation. So it's not as easy as it sounds, just meeting income criteria.
And
So,
you're saying they made too much money.
yeah.
That's the,
And they have to show bank statements, they have to show, their credit scores have to be at a certain level.
so they have to be bad in order to offer them.
No, quite the opposite. They have to have a credit score of 650 or above, which is not. Yeah, no, because the owner doesn't want to, wants reliable tenants, yeah. Sure. So reliable, they want to see credit history, they want to see work history, they want to assure that there's not more individuals living in the property than are stated on the application. And so some of these people, and I won't take any more time in a moment, but, fall out because they're not able to meet all of those, so this has taken, over 15 months to get 2 apartments filled. So
And are there, so there's no relation to workforce housing? This is
no,
affordable.
workforce housing is completely different.
All right.
Yeah.
And with the affordable housing,
This is state-driven. This is not,
so
this
is
is,
COA really, I mean,
yes,
so there's money to supplement that?
So that's actually here.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay? It's on page 2 in section J. you can receive fund, it's a little bit out of context, the way that it's written, but the way that I read it, that out of if you were to build 12 accessory apartment units, 6 of them would have to be low income, meaning 6 of them could be moderate income. Okay? And then the financial incentive that's available is $20,000 for a moderate income, $25,000 for a low income, and $30,000 for a very low income unit. So if you take that 12 accessory unit complex that's being built, it's $270,000 to $300,000 of financial incentives that would come out of the COA fund to help someone to build those 12 units. Okay, I can't say that it's never been utilized, but from the conversations that I recall at the planning board, it certainly is underutilized if it's ever been used at all.
Yeah, I was going to ask, of the 12, are there any in existence? And there are 2? There are 2?
They're not accessory, those were the result of the development on Pittsburgh Avenue.
Yeah, right. Lafayette Street was
Yes,
required.
so those are not necessarily, I would say.
Accessory apartments.
Yeah.
But
Accessory
this is an
apartments is,
incentive.
if you have a house and you decide that you want to incorporate an accessory apartment, this would be the process that you would follow, and you would apply to the city. To my knowledge, I don't know of any of these that exist. That doesn't mean they don't. It's just not something that, it probably predates my time on council, if it does, Sarah. So the other 2 were part of an agreed-upon settlement between the plan, that was done at the planning board level, because the builder was required to provide those as part of the affordable housing plan, which is another component to this. They had to either build the units in the developed site or offer alternatives to that, and they came up with the alternative, and that was accepted. There's a whole other piece that's affordable housing that's.
So what we have on the books in Cape May does not address what is being discussed at the state level, that the municipality has to allow for accelerated dwelling units. So we can draw a bright line between ADUs and accessory apartments. An accessory apartment is an ADU, but not all ADUs are accessory apartments. Okay? So what the state is trying to do is to provide workforce housing, and where the planning board has landed, which I do agree with, is the work that they are doing, it's workforce housing and long-term rental housing. So because you really can't define what workforce is, and there's debate about whether that workforce has to be within Cape May or outside of Cape May. We talked at our last meeting about there being a need for there to be places that are budget-friendly within the city so that the city stays vital, but then also places that potentially are outside the city for the people that work in Cape May. So there's more coming on this. I just wanted to build off what Sarah had already introduced to us in terms of the ADUs, and I think it warrants watching. I even think, is it not recording? No, it is.
I can speak to one. I do have one update on it. I don't know if that's helpful. So when I sent around that last email, it was about Bill S234. There was a new proposed bill in the 2026 session, so it was introduced January 13th. It's S1786.
S1?
786. So I haven't read a ton into it yet, but I do know the differences between the two was the old bill, every municipality had to match one model ADU ordinance. And this new one, there's minimum state standards. So municipalities have local control over design, parking, setbacks, and other zoning details.
So what would be required within Cape May would be a change in the zoning law to allow for accessory dwelling units
Right.
to meet whatever, if this bill becomes law.
So the terminology I'm not familiar with, this is implying that you only have to do this for 10 years.
It's deed restricted.
It's called,
Yep.
it says it meets a minimum 10-year control period.
Right.
Is-
So I don't know the law, the New Jersey affordable housing law close enough to know what that phrase means.
But a deed restriction would be a permanent.
So my,
Right.
this is, I think, related. There was a property for sale in Westgate, May, that was income restricted, and they had advertised it, that it was only income restricted for 2 more years, or some limited period of time, and then the buyer could do whatever they wanted to with it. So it must not have been a deed restriction, it must have just been that. And I have no idea if somebody bought it and maintained it.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is the COA regulations and what we're required to do. I mean, we're in our round 4 at this point, and the state has, we get criteria that's put down from the state. So, I don't know if that 10 years is just, 0 to 10, and at the end of it, you're out and you no longer have a deed restriction on that property, and that you're able just to rent it in the manner that you choose to, or once it gets into the program, it makes it that much more difficult for it to come out. I would defer to Chris Gillenschwartz on that, because, again, we just got a new round of criteria that will be presented at the next planning board meeting, so.
But that's affordable housing. That's not salary dwelling units.
So there's
Right.
part of this, which is whatever we're required to do, and it's not clear to me whether what would we want to do if we weren't required to do anything, right? And then try to fit whatever that is in the context of the,
So in terms of trying to provide long-term rental units for people that we want to live in the city, or having surrounding towns provide long-term rental units for people that work in the city, or workforce housing, or seasonal help housing, or all those things, affordable housing doesn't do any of that.
because we presume that people in the workforce make too much money.
No, they just don't meet all of the different standards, and we can't restrict it to people that live or work in Cape May.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a lottery. You could even not live in New Jersey, and you could apply if you meet the criteria and get that precious unit that we're trying to come up with. Yep, you had something?
No.
Okay, so I also did do a little bit of work through ChatGPT and found a couple of really interesting blogs that were offered by somebody that makes modular homes, and talked about the different kinds of things that are happening in different states. And in that, I found one passage that said that in New Jersey, certain municipalities offer incentives and financing for ADUs. That municipalities participate in affordable housing or workforce housing programs that may provide low-interest loans, fee reductions, or tax incentives if the ADU is rented at an affordable rate. At the state level, programs tied to housing accessibility, aging in place, or energy efficiency may also apply depending on how the ADU is used and built. So there's grant money available at the state level for aging in place units, and we just don't allow them here in Cape May. So this is a bit of a long-term project, I think, but I also do think that given we have representation from Planning Board and Zoning Board, I think the 3 units could probably form some type of task force and begin to explore what's available, keep an eye on this legislation, no different than the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee was keeping an eye on e-bike legislation, and then boom, it was law. So it could happen that quickly, you don't know. But the objective at the state level is to provide places for people to live that are reasonably priced. I can't use the word affordable because that has a different meaning.
very confusing.
Right. Okay, so thanks, this is great stuff, and I think that there's a component to us where if we are a participant in these discussions, and I believe if we say that there is something that is being offered as a financial incentive, just like we're doing with the housing over the units in Washington Mall, if we provide those people with something, then we also have the right to say you can't be used as transient housing. Mm-hmm. Okay, which we don't want units to be built and then be on Airbnb.
Right.
Sarah, was there anything in the New Jersey proposed legislation on affordability? Because, I mean, we're sort of seeing this in
It's all
states
fenced
across the
enough.
country,
Yeah, I
like-
didn't read the details enough yet.
you'd be surprised, but Montana is a leader on increasing housing. There's an affordability crisis everywhere, so you're sort of speaking towards market rate issues. I love the ideas. My questions about it for Cape May are, this committee and others spend a lot of time talking about traffic. And so I think the idea is right. You build something that is market rate, not allowed to be a seasonal or a short-term rental. And then you are hoping to attract possibly workers who are working in the city and they become full-time residents, et cetera. But there will be some issues related to an increase in residential population that have to do with traffic and parking. It's just something we should be mindful of.
Or potentially coming up with some type of a revenue-generating program that allows the city to subsidize that market rate rent. If
Yeah.
that market rate is too high for people to reasonably afford.
Right, like there's always
Bridge that gap.
there's a geometry problem, which is that the island is the size of the island,
Right.
and the lots are the size of the lots, and there's only so many units
Right.
that can be built, and that might not shift the market enough.
But if,
So you're
if
right.
I wanted to convert my garage into an apartment, I would need to get a whole slew of variances because it's not, you're not allowed to build an accessory dwelling unit in Cape May.
Right, yeah.
Well, and there's a number,
Under that criteria.
there's a number
Well,
of,
I would need, you would need exceptions to every one of those. You would need a variance for every one of those to be able to convert my apartment into somebody where, that can age in place. Well, I guess I'm aging in place in our house, but that's, we all are, right?
Pretty much.
I mean, I'm trying to understand the connection between this and, you know, allowing further multifamily, you know, take some vacant lots on Pittsburgh and say, well, why wouldn't we zone that to be able to put multiple townhouses as long-term rentals or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that area in particular, it's wetlands. It's not going to be DEP approved. In fact, going back to Mr. Hurlis and his, you know, round 4 report, there's no land on which to build in Cape May.
Without knocking something down.
Well, yeah, but that's not, yeah, that's privately owned. It's not city-owned.
Sure, no, I understand. I'm talking, what causes me to think about it is I drive past, you know, on Pittsburgh, there's
yeah.
lots for sale for
Yep,
$1.5 million
yep,
bucks a piece. You theoretically, I presume they're buildable, and you could put 10.
I wouldn't necessarily say. There are,
I-
yeah, there are properties back off of El Vento
Yeah.
that are for sale, but not necessarily buildable.
Okay.
So it's not, just because people want to sell land doesn't necessarily mean you can do
Yeah,
anything
no.
with
And
it.
we have friction between where can we put affordable housing, and then where would we put these long-term rentals? So it's complicated, but if we don't talk about it, then nothing's going to happen.
No, it's true.
All right? And so I do think that for 2026, again, we'll talk about the 26 issues. I think this is one. I think this is one where there's enough interest in furthering the discussion, particularly with the potential for there being legislation that now forces us to react to. Anything else on ADUs?
Just want to make one comment for the committee, if you have time. There was an ordinance that was introduced at the last council meeting that talked about some components of this in the C5 district. There will be a full report that was put together by Mr. Hurlis that will be presented at the next planning board meeting. So if you have interest around sort of, understanding how the space is evolving on the affordable housing side for the city, which we are required by law, then I would encourage you to look at both of those.
Yeah, I saw that the Herald picked that up.
Yeah.
And
Well, everywhere in the-
honestly, what happened at city council meeting last week,
Yeah.
okay, was the latest step in continuing to ensure that the city is in compliance. It doesn't actually get us any closer to building anything. It just furthers the plan that the city had because the state issued a deadline that we had to meet. And it was a relatively tight deadline, so we met it. We did what we had to do, but it didn't really propose any new practical solutions to the issue.
Other than identify an opportunity, should that opportunity come
Right.
before us in some form or fashion.
Right, and to be clear, what the work that we would do, or that I'm suggesting we would do, would be on ADUs, not on affordable housing. There are much brighter
why I
people.
wanted to make
There are
sure
much brighter
everyone
people than us, okay, that are going to have to deal with the affordable housing issue. Okay, so next is, I knew that attendance would be a little bit light tonight, so I didn't do anything on this in advance. You may recall that when I first was given the opportunity to be chairperson, I put together a list of potential issues for 2025-26. Some of those we've been working on, some of them we haven't been. So I've kind of, I've taken another look at that and thought about the discussions that we've already been having. And I think where I would like to go, since this is our first meeting, and unfortunately we do only meet every other month, I'm going to send a list of the issues that I have identified and any others that anybody wants to add to each member and ask them to commit to one of the projects, so that there are a series of teams that will be working on a variety of things. Given that we meet every other month, if there aren't sub-teams, subcommittees that are working on things, things aren't going to
I agree.
progress. Okay, so what I've identified is the MTRAC mission statement, and I am tracking what HPC is doing. They have alignment meetings, and I don't know whether they have to be, they're not regular meetings, they meet separately. And I will take a look and see what they're doing in terms of whether those need to be sunshined or not. If it needs to be sunshined, if we want to have the full committee work on it, if it needs to be sunshined, then that's what we would need to do. The alternative is that we would get 3 people to work together and come up with some, we're not replacing the ordinance that exists that forms MTRAC, okay? We're simply saying that these are the principles that MTRAC works under, the kind of the things that you've talked about in the past, okay? The beach concessions follow-up with Steve Stager. I think that's one. The residential parking permits was a 26 issue, and that's completed now. There's nothing more that we need to do on that. We do have the state budget appropriations and revenue cap issue. I've been working with Maureen and Paul to try to get time with Lauren, our new CFO, and this is not the time of year where she has the opportunity to do that. So I will do some research on my own and work with you gentlemen to further that issue.
Martin, I did have a follow-up with Paul today.
Okay.
He's going to reach out to you, and hopefully sometime in, now that I've laid out what the planned budget presentations are, she should be able to have some time, maybe towards the latter part of March, but Paul assured me he would be in touch with you
Right.
with a date.
Right.
Okay.
So, and we will continue to push it forward before that, because the latter part of March, our next meeting is April. So if we're going to make progress, we've got to get on the stick. There's a parking study that we've been requested to do, more on that in a minute. I want to follow up on the, as I mentioned earlier, the expansion of the short-term rental and mercantile license tracking to include the realtors. I think that when the planning board met and discussed the results of their subcommittee on parking, their recommendation was that a study be done, because we haven't done a parking study since 2002. And the immediate response was, well, where's the money going to come from? Well, that's our job, right?
Money for the parking
For
study?
the parking study, okay? So
What is a parking study, really?
well, so you would need to, I'm not going to recap the whole thing. You'd need to watch the meeting.
I will.
Okay?
Okay.
But basically, where the planning board came out, and please correct me if I'm misstating it all, is we need data to be able to make a decision, but just turning a consulting firm loose isn't going to get us the data that we need, okay? So it would have to be set up in a way that is structured to give very specific instructions on what we're looking for. And it would not just be how many spots are available on a brutal rainstorm in the middle of a July afternoon over by the Cove, which was one of the parking studies that was done. And there was plenty of parking apparently available during COVID, during the rainstorm in July. Okay, that's not a parking study.
Yep.
But where I'm going with this is you brought the idea one time about sponsorship of city initiatives.
Yep.
Okay, forming getting a sponsor for the nature walk cleanup. Okay, we could potentially look for sponsorship for the parking study to help the city to decide this is something that needs to be done, for example.
Martin, can I just add to that?
Can I just, I did have a very brief conversation with Chris Killenschwartz
Yep.
about that. So anything, before you start exploring that, it really is, being a municipal government, it's not really, I don't want to say not permitted, but it's more than likely, maybe not in the context that some people are used to
Yep.
sponsorships, but Chris could give you any criteria for which it might meet.
Right.
So just want to put that
So
out as a caveat.
we would need to have a group of people that would take that on as a topic.
Yep.
And then they would need to meet with Chris and find out what's
Yeah, he
possible.
gave me a response, and I wouldn't be able to find it right now, but I very specifically
Yep.
asked him, being in, municipal government, what's permitted, what's not permitted, kind of a thing, and what's the perception of influence of that. So anyway, he can provide that to you.
And then,
Martin, can I just add one thing?
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have no doubt that we need a new parking study. What I want to make sure is included, if and when we get to that point, is what are the goals? Right? Because I think there's, especially for people who aren't versed in how government works, who don't sit on these committees, there is this idea that the more available parking, the better. And that would probably mean you won't be able to get over the bridge because there'll be unlimited parking and everyone will drive. And so I just want to make sure that I don't know that we should be the driver of what those goals are, whether the consultant drives it or whether it comes from council. But someone should say, here's what our objectives are. We want to make sure that there's satisfactory parking for tourists over the summer, for our residents on the street, a comprehensive, guiding light for that study.
So Joe, as part of the discussion at the planning board meeting, many of us there was a small work group that worked on this, but many of us did sort of add to that. And some of the things that I added to it is, look, you have to include employers and employees. You need to make sure that we have a constituency list that is just not saying, is there parking, around the mall in July? And that it's broader than that. My point was, you're on the east end of town, there's plenty of parking. You drive up and down the street, you can park. It's location driven. And Craig Hurlis, who is our board planner, basically said, you may not want more parking because it is a control mechanism. Because you can't just satisfy everyone, and how many more people could you put on the mall? You can't get a reservation in a restaurant now in the summertime. What more can you do from a capacity standpoint? So there were some interesting discussions around it. And even, Dennis, said, look, we believe there should be a parking study. And he said, or if not, let's just decide that there's nothing we can do about it. Your point, the island's only so big. How much more could you put, and where would you put parking? Is it going to interfere with our obligation for, COA and affordable housing by taking something? So there's this complexity of interwoven issues, which is why it will be decided whether or not, if council wants to move forward, once it comes to us, because it's not one-dimensional. There's just, again, we don't have any land. So, those are the kinds of things. Do we trade off the requirements from the state for parking versus building affordable housing, which we should do because we need to be able to meet our obligation, et cetera, et cetera. So aside from just the traffic study and who's the constituency and what are the goals, there's these other layers that are sort of,
You just used the magic word. There's also a traffic component to this.
yeah, which,
Where we no longer have the ability to get off the island in a reasonable amount of time at certain times of day. And I shared with a couple of my colleagues while I was away in St. Martin, it took me 4.5 hours to go less than 4 miles once we landed in St. Martin. So I've seen what happens if you continue to bring cars into a place without giving any consideration to
The impact.
how they're going to move around, okay?
I always say
Had
the
a-
island's going to sink.
Had a conversation this week about, a parking garage. Well, that may provide for additional parking, but that also means additional cars, and then that will fill up, and now you need another parking garage. In addition to someone that I know that I had a conversation with who is the former chief of police in New Brunswick, he said, you build a parking garage, you have a homeless problem too, because it's sheltered. So it's a very complicated issue. And what Dennis's sentiment is either do a parking study so that we have facts so that we can proceed, or let's stop talking about it. And we can't stop talking about it. We need to be talking about how we transport people around the island. And if the parking's on the east side and people don't want to be on the east side, then we've got to have a way, okay, even for residents, for them to be able to get to the places that they want to go.
I had that plan.
It has to be fun, and it has to be convenient, and it has to be able to carry their beach stuff, okay? Or, we could be talking about moving employees and having the employees that all come in from off the island, having some type of a satellite parking with transportation. It's bigger, and it's bigger than even just Cape May.
Mike was on council when I put forth that plan.
So I do think that that's another project that just has so many different components to it and there is a revenue component, so that we should have, we should be a part of those discussions from the start. And that's what we'll form a work team and we'll move forward on that. That's what I had as being sort of the focus for 2026. We won't accomplish it all, but if we continue to just eat away at these things, that's how things happen. Any other suggestions?
So there were two topics I know that we've batted about historically as well. One of them has to do with Coast Guard. There's a word for the government.
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Thank you, payment in lieu of taxes. And then the other one was has been going on for years, the kind of the funding mechanism for schools with Lower Township and some of that back and forth. I don't know, those are political.
Yeah, so the pilot.
And I don't know that we
Yeah,
can go down that path.
I'll just share the background that I'm aware of, and I know that Mike's probably aware of too. I mean, there have been exhaustive conversations at all levels, including the state and congressional and senatorial representatives with regard to the pilot program. And it's gone nowhere. And it's unlikely that it will.
No, we actually have a pilot program. I found that out. We have a pilot program. for the
Okay.
Coast Guard.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I saw it in the newspaper.
Just for the Coast Guard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it would be for, is to have the federal government help subsidize the services that Cape May provides.
Right.
So there actually is one for the schools. And it was.
Well,
an
just
article-
not both schools, I don't believe, is it just the local school, not
The
the high school?
elementary school, right, 'cause we
Yeah,
don't-
so we're paying for the high school.
Right.
Yeah.
And the middle school,
So, yeah.
over township.
And that whole thing is, face it, we keep wanting to talk about something that Lower Township controls, and why in heaven's name do you ever think that they would change their mind and say, yeah, we'll be glad to share all our
Lower
money
and West
with you
Cape May.
guys?
So there will always be 2 votes against us.
Always,
That's why-
always 2 against us, yeah. So
I
anyhow,
went to a meeting with the Taxpayers Association, to the Lower Township Administration. We tried to have a conversation when I was on the Taxpayers Association, and, I mean,
there's, nothing to talk about.
No, I feel, I'm trying to think about things that could have a much more significant impact than
they're so happy with the
parking
arrangement.
fees or, those kind of-
Right.
Well, I had identified it on that original list as a
Yeah, no, I
long-term
understand.
project, okay? And given there's only 8 of us,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And I would say that these
No,
the
I'm- I-
issues
I'm
that I
so- I
raised are a
support
little bit
those for sure.
higher priority, meaning that these are things that can happen sooner.
Okay.
The article that I read where I was indicated there was a pilot program was the consolidation of the West Cape May and Cape May elementary schools. And I don't know whether that's going to go anywhere or not.
That's being
But-
driven by the state, right? Aren't they?
No, it was actually being discussed here on the island. There are drivers coming from the state to consolidate
Yeah,
school districts.
they
Yep.
had started it themselves, but I also thought I just read something that
Yep.
the state was putting forth potential legislation to require a certain, based on the size of the
Right.
school or the participation by the number of students, so.
And I also read that Cape May Point is a school of choice borough. so they don't participate in the arrangement. Yep.
That's right.
So I'm going to, those are the projects I've identified. Again, I'll circulate them. I'll ask each member to indicate, their first and second choice, and then we'll form a bunch of subcommittees to be able to make sure that we're continuing to make progress.
I'm not sure it's worth the effort, but there is this other issue that I had some conversations with the Coast Guard on, and that issue is, of course, the desal plant, which is going to be a fortune, for us, regardless of how much we get from the federal and state governments. There's still a large bit of money that we're going to have to come up with. And Zach and I had brief discussions with the Coast Guard about them actually paying a bit more. I mean, they demand a lot of water capacity. We have to size our demand, our capacity, I should say, to meet their demand. And my question to them is that can we not basically charge you a more appropriate
Yep.
number because of the size?
Yep.
Well, anyhow, I think, first of all, their answer was no, but
Shocking.
I'm sorry, we were asking for them to help with the investment. That's when they said, not on a bet. However, the commander at the time, not the base commander, but this is one of the other commanders, said that by the way, we do pay our bills. We always pay our bills. So he was kind of wink, wink. You could charge us more money, say, for the water that we consume. Now, whether or not it's a source of revenue for us to support the desal plant, I don't know. I think somebody, it may have been Paul, kind of put a kibosh to it, because I think he said that they really don't. We had the understanding that they consumed as much as 12% of all the water on Cape Island, and I believe Paul said it's not even close to that kind of number. Nonetheless, it's a significant number. Do we want to pursue that with the Coast Guard is the question. And I really do think it's, the local Coast Guard can, they can make decisions, or, they can say, we're not going to fight you if we do, in fact,
Is
if
it your
you do
assessment that
rates.
MTRAC has a role in those discussions? So should we be identifying it as something we're going to work on?
In setting water rates? Is that, that's the real question, right? Do we?
Probably not.
Okay.
Yeah, probably not.
But I think it's an important point because there are different customers, right? And so the customer of the Coast Guard base wouldn't put capital money up, but if we send them a bill that incorporates some of the financing as, in a way to recoup, that's part of the discussion and dialogue, which was why Mike and the mayor went out to have that initial conversation. Just as West Cape May is a customer and gets bulk rates, when we get to that point, and Cape May Point, there may need to be some discussions about that. They may not have capital to help with the ability to invest in it, but there's got to be some associated, there's an associated expense for the city that needs to be recouped. And Paul is taking that into consideration as he's looking at the model and looking at some other, components to this, and how much the city is going to be under the obligation and how much we're getting in grant money and on other federal funding, and loan forgiveness and all of those other things that are still evolving at this point, so.
Okay, thank you for letting us know about it. Appreciate that. So now we'll go back to our normal roundtable of topics that are on people's minds. I wanted to start with Maureen on the parking.
Yeah, so there is one thing that we've talked about internally and wanted to find out if this group would be willing to assist in what will be a very short turnaround, as unfortunately we sometimes do. But we have not across the board, raised parking rates in the last 6 years. And so, as we've done with other projects like beach tags, et cetera, we have an opportunity to maybe take a look at that, do a brief survey of some of the municipalities that use Park Mobile, and there are a number of them, in Cape May County alone, and make some recommendations back to council. What I discussed with Martin is ideally if we could do this and have some recommendation for April timeline, it would meet with our meeting, and we could present it to it would go to council for their second meeting, ideally in April. And at that point, we'd still have time to make some impact for this season coming up. So I'm looking to, put that out to the group. I can assist and participate in any way you need me to, but it's not normally something, sometimes Martin and I work with Paul directly, but this is something, if a component of people, a couple people from the group wanted to get involved, just need the commitment that we could get it turned around in that period of time, and that's why I wanted to put it out there. If not, I'll try and work directly just with Paul, but I thought this was a sort of a good short-term project, to have MTRAC involved with, so.
Does Park Mobile, I would have thought they could provide us a wealth of information.
That was my question.
Well, they could, but here's what I don't want to get hung up with them, waiting for data to come for what Avalon charges versus Stone Harbor versus, et cetera. They may have to get client approval because they may consider it proprietary. I don't know any of those things. Now, I can start there, but the fact of the matter is we could probably go on to each of those websites and get that information just as quickly. And I don't necessarily want to ask them for them to
See what happens.
yeah, I don't want them to have to share with me what revenue Stone Harbor makes. So if it's a matter of knowing what an hourly rate is in a, commercial zone, or that's the kind of research that we need. We need, 5 or 6 municipalities on a piece of paper. What are they charging? What's it look like? And then the fact that we haven't raised it, Paul is going to also take a look at, are there other, potential areas in the city that we could add Park Mobile to, that don't exist now, and that might prove to be some benefit. This has a little bit of, juice in it from that one, but it's more about the rates, knowing what the season brings, so.
I guess fundamentally, a couple of things crossed my mind. One is, it's nice to know what the other municipalities charge, but on the other hand, I could say, why do we care? We have a certain amount of parking, and we should be able to.
Well, it's always been the approach with MTRAC. We've always done sort of at least a comparison. We did this when we looked at the Park Mobile contract. Ron, before you were on, when I got on council, this was an area that I was working on and wanted to understand the revenue. When we got our contract, we found out, lo and behold, that there were more better rates that were being provided to some of our municipalities locally, so we were able to renegotiate on that. Sure. I think it's just a basis for argument when we're putting it out to the public. In my opinion, as a council member, I'd like to be able to say I can justify my position based on looking at neighboring, so that we're just not looking at being a money grab, which is always a criticism.
That's the other debate.
Right.
There's an easy way to limit traffic, which I'm not proposing this, but you
Right.
could say it's $20 for 15 minutes,
Right.
and I'll bet you we won't have a lot of people
Right.
fighting over parking spots.
Right.
but
Right.
that had-
Right. I think, sort of a reasonable percentage of increase that's based on, a comparison to some local municipalities, but also, sort of takes a look at, demand and, kind of a thing. And
It's the kind of thing that people will challenge you on anyhow,
Right.
stand up at council meetings.
absolutely.
And they'll know what the
Right.
rates
No,
are in
it's
the
true.
other towns.
yeah, I mean, that is, it's having information becomes the powerful justification in many ways. Anytime we say we haven't done this in 6 years, is a starting point, but also to say that we've got some basis for it.
We did similar work on the beach tags.
Yeah.
We
Exactly.
polled what all the other towns from available information. We wouldn't necessarily say, well, Cape May should be at the median of all of the surrounding towns. It's more a matter of knowing where those surrounding towns are and where are we today. Obviously, anytime that something doesn't change in 6 years, you're losing money because the workers that are taking the quarters out of the meters are making more than they did 6 years ago.
Yep.
And the other thing, I'm sorry, Jim, just so I don't forget this, is to understand, other towns may shut their Park Mobile off earlier than we do, but we are a town that has more of a 10-year season, so that would be the other piece of information to include in there. So I put it out there, and I guess, can we have a discussion as to whether or not this is of an interest to anybody? I'm happy to work with them and do whatever.
Oh, we'll do it, for sure.
Okay, all right, thanks, Martin. Yeah.
So I think it's a yes and, right? So the yes is, yes, we should know how we're priced competitively, even though we're not actually competing on parking spots, right? People aren't choosing to park in Stone Harbor because their rate's less expensive than it is in KMA. But for a quick turnaround purpose, it's good to know where we stand in a competitive market for attracting tourists who are paying those meters. But the and is this. Good parking policy, and I think I maybe said this last year, good parking policy suggests that parking is priced correctly when there's one available spot on every block face. So that way people are not circling 2 or 3 blocks of Washington Street Mall 10 times waiting for a spot. There's always a spot available. And Park Mobile's data is powerful enough to get to that direction. Now, the one thing that it doesn't account for is you buy 10 hours at the beach and you leave after 6, it's not exactly perfect because you don't need to renew every 2 or 3 hours, which is something that could be switched over. But I think the long term and maybe incorporated into that parking study is what is the pricing? What is current occupancy? Are people driving up and down Beach Ave looking for spots when they should have already been able to park within a block because it's priced appropriately? So I think the first step is doing exactly what Maureen suggested, and the second step is incorporating the larger policy practice into that parking study.
I see this as similar to the beach concessions and the residential parking permits, where we will collect our information, we'll put together, we'll accumulate that, and if we want to include other recommendations on parking, like dynamic parking fees, we have the opportunity to do that. There's no guarantee that there's going to be an audience for it, but this does give us the opportunity to make additional suggestions.
And I'll just,
I would encourage you to do that, because then, even if not part of this component, should there be a parking study, traffic study, whatever may come out of the other resolution, then these types of things being added into it. Because I agree with you. Park Mobile information, what we look at is revenue and usage, and, people are in a restaurant, add 2 more hours to it, let's go have a drink kind of thing. No one dives into that data. And I would say to you, quite frankly, Job, I don't know that anybody, not a disparaging comment, but no one certainly within administration has that knowledge base to be able to do it and come out with recommendations. There's nobody.
that's what the parking consultant is for.
Exactly. So I think it would be an important component to it. Let them drill to the data and make policy recommendations for changes to the city.
And the other thing, just on what Martin said about dynamic pricing, that's the best. Park Mobile's technology is not there yet. Google had some technology that they folded, so it's just not, you would need live cameras, which is not really what you want to do yet, but there's a way to start thinking about, like, if the consultant comes out and says, best practice is dynamic parking, there's a way for council to start thinking, well, 5 years from now,
Correct.
that technology
That's
might
exactly
be ready,
right. And that's one of the things that was discussed at the planning.
Okay, I get it, I have to watch this
We
video.
don't know how people are going to move around 20 years from now. We don't, there's school of thought that people won't have cars anymore, that they'll Uber everywhere.
Waymo. Yeah, Waymo's rolling out in Philadelphia this year.
Right. So, as the only 2 people that have read Paved Paradise, I'd like to work on it with you, if you don't mind. We can do it by phone. And were there any other acute interests in helping on this study, or leave it to Job and I?
I'm happy to help.
Okay.
If I can remotely.
Okay.
I'm happy to help too.
Well, we can't have 4, because
Oh, okay, that's right. 3. Okay, never mind.
So, I'm already working on you on your project, so I'll have Sarah help us on this. Is that good?
Sound good?
All right.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I'll let Martin know.
Other-
I'll let Paul know, sorry.
Other roundtable topics, what's on your minds? Anything?
I'm gonna have to excuse myself
Okay.
to go catch a flight.
I think we have no public, so I think we are ready for adjournment, if anyone wants to make a
Move to
motion.
adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Thanks. Great.
Thank you.
Another great meeting.
Okay.
Is
love moving along, yes.
With what? Oh, God almighty. What are you good with? Good to see you too. Take care.
Too.
Maureen, the challenge is not the challenge of not having like a million people